Hi, everybody. It's Tom here from Give Together. I'd like to do a quick presentation on what makes a strong proposal. One of the key aspects of our Giving Circle is that each year we ask members to submit proposals about various projects or groups or organizations that they might have come across over the year. And at the end of each year, around May, we do a gathering where we get together and we talk about the merit of each proposal. What are their strengths, and through that, we decide on how the group is actually going to distribute the funding for that particular year. And so my hope is that this quick presentation will provide you with some practical guides and tips around what are the things that make a strong proposal and what are some of the things that might help you get started if you are interested in doing a proposal. Each year, we want to get around 3 to 5 proposals for the group to discuss. Fewer than that, I think, leaves limited options. Too many proposals means that we don't get to spend enough time on each proposal. So in general, we are looking for about 3, 4, or 5 proposals to discuss. And hopefully this presentation will give you the confidence to submit one if you are interested. This is just an overview of the types of things that we have supported over the years. I'm not going to go through each of them. What I will say is that the Giving Circle has been running now for 8 years. This year we rebranded to Give Together. And over those 8 years, we have supported 9 different projects. And you can look up the different organizations that we've supported, or you'll find more info in our brochure. And what you'll see is that we really have, over the years, supported a range of different projects and different organizations, a range in terms of the demographics, geographic location, the types of projects we support. And I think that that's one of the strengths of our group as well, is that we're able to really focus in and fund something that other funders might not fund. And I think through our process of having members submit proposals, it's a really great process because it means that most of the kind of initial vetting has been done prior to a proposal getting to our table to discuss. And what it means is that anything that we support is really going to be a worthy cause. So this is just an example of the different organizations that we've supported. I will go through some of them in a minute in a bit more detail just to show the similarities, but then also the differences between the different proposals or the different projects. But before we do, I thought I would just quickly make note of, I guess, our impact over the last few years. So we were established in 2016, initially with 14 people, sorry. We had a lower group last year, and I think cost of living really did affect some of our members, which is absolutely understandable. So we initially, I think, were looking at having about a $48,000 donation, but we lost a few members across the year. So we ended up donating $38,000, which is still an incredible amount. This year, the membership is up, so we're looking at possibly around 45,000. I do expect, though, that probably some people will drop off towards the end of the financial year. And so, we're always willing to take new members. If any existing members know anybody who might want to join, please pass on our details. And finally, since we've been running, we've given away over $210,000, which is pretty incredible. And this year we're looking to surpass $245,000. I would love us, if we can crack the $250,000 mark. That would be a huge milestone. $250,000 in 8 years, I think, is pretty powerful stuff for just a group of people, a group of like-minded people coming together and pooling our resources. So now I want to go into a few of our successfully funded projects. And I kind of want to just talk about some of the similarities that they have and some of the differences to give people who are considering putting a proposal together an idea of the breadth of the things that we fund. So, of course, I start with our very first year, which is the Youth Leadership Program in 2016, which was run by the Settlement Neighbourhood Centre. And this program really focused on youth and specifically First Nations youth. Just some kind of key things here. The program is still running annually. It's now become a flagship program of the settlement. And I think a lot of us who were there in the early years are very proud that we kind of seed funded that. The program really focuses on leadership and really connecting youth to culture. And a really great outcome is that two of the members of the earlier programs are now working at the settlement. And so it did lead to an employment pathway for some of the youth. And there's a quote there from Hayley, who's one of the girls who has been through the program, just kind of speaking about what the program meant for her and why she found it important. Next, I want to talk about Rosemary's Way. This is a picture of Rosemary. Rosemary is a Kenyan-born Australian who is a police liaison for the Parramatta Police. And Rosemary runs a really great program for refugee and migrant women who are often experiencing higher levels of isolation, higher levels of domestic violence, and lower socioeconomic outcomes. And so each year, Rosemary runs a program where she takes a cohort of women from Western Sydney, from migrant backgrounds, to rural Australia, and they kind of do a farm stay. And it really is about building connections with those communities, breaking down the barriers between people who are coming from very different worlds, and really providing, I guess, the ability for the women to find their inner power, and hopefully come back and have built a good network by the time they get back. Now, we didn't actually fund Rosemary's program. I initially did approach Rosemary to fund her program, but she actually didn't want the funding because it would have been too much, and it would have meant that she had to scale up her program to a level that she didn't want to. So what we did end up funding was a documentary called Rosemary's Way, which was a documentary made about Rosemary. And we funded a position, an outreach officer, and the outreach officer was not a funded position. The documentary was made, it was produced, it was ready to go, but they needed some support to get an outreach officer to help promote the film and get it out there. And they did get it out there. The film played in the Sydney Film Festival, it played in other festivals, it played on TV. And what it meant is that everyone across Australia, and I'm sure internationally, were able to see the film. And so we were able to come in and fund a very specific position with a very specific purpose to help do that. And Rosemary went on to become the Australian of the Year, local hero in 2021, and got an Order of Australia. Of course, that's not due to us in any way. It's due to her amazing career and her amazing contributions. But it is nice, I think, for those of us who are involved in that year to feel like we had some part of getting Rosemary's story out there. And then, that allows other people to see her story and become inspired and see the opportunities that might be ahead for them. And finally, Rosemary released a book, A Joyful Life, in 2023. And I think, particularly since her Local Hero Award has had a new kind of, well, it's not new, but a larger presence in terms of, being a public figure and really kind of being a public leader. And so this was an interesting one because it was the group funded it. Really, it's an arts position, but it also is a project that supported migrant and refugee women. And Rosemary's program continues to run and grow. And finally, in 21-22, we funded a composting toilet. I mean, it's one of my favorite ones to talk about because I love saying that we paid to get a toilet built. But it was much more than just getting a toilet built. So this was a project that focused on environment, and we were funding the infrastructure, which are notoriously difficult grants to get. And we funded a toilet to be constructed at the Westside Community Garden in Alice Springs. And really they needed the toilet built because it really allowed for safer, more comfortable access for the community members in that community to access a community garden. And, you know, without the toilet, the community members were having to kind of access the facilities at a school, which was not an ideal environment for them to be going into. But it also meant that they were limited then in when they could access the garden itself. So by funding the toilet, it was able to provide better access to that garden for the community. But it was also a composting toilet. I'm not sure the exact system, but the funding, this was built and the funding went to the Arid Lands Environment Centre. And they were also trying to show as a kind of secondary impact for them, the importance of a composting toilet in these arid environments. And so I think they were hoping that this could be used as a bit of a model for toilets that could be built in more communities in these arid environments. So again, a very different kind of project that we funded. So how are these proposals different? Well, one, the settlement was funding a program, Rosemary's Way was funding a position, and the toilet was funding infrastructure. So three very different things. One was city-based, being the settlement. Rosemary's Way was really about getting the program or the movie Australia-wide. And the Arid Land Council, or Arid Land Environment Centre was a remote project that we funded. One focused on youth, one focused on arts, one focused on environment. The youth program had more of a First Nations focus. Rosemary's Way had more of a migrant women focus. And the compost toilet was more focusing around a community garden and strengthening that community. And finally, when we look at what we funded, the settlement we funded, it was, I guess, seed funding to run a pilot project. And we funded that whole pilot project for that particular year. The Rosemary's Way was funding a position that was a part of a much larger project, which is the movie. And so we didn't fund the movie, but we did fund a position within a larger project. And interestingly, with the composting toilet, we funded the full build of the composting toilet, but that was only a partial use of the entire amount that we gave that year. So I think that year, roughly, we had about $30,000, and the composting toilet only cost $13,000. So we were not only able to fully fund that project, but with the leftover funding, we could fund a second project, which was the Deadly Science greenhouse kits for schools. So again, it just shows, I guess I chose these three examples because it shows the variety of things in terms of the types of things we'll fund, the places that we'll fund, the kind of demographics or thematic divisions that we fund, and then also the structure of how we've used our funding. So it's not only funding to, you know, pay for a program or pay for a position. Like we can be very flexible with how we do that. But what do they have in common? So that's how they're different. What did they have in common? What did the proposals have in common? Well, they were a clear impact. So the group, when we discussed, we could really understand what we were funding and what the impact would be. And I think that's a really important part. If you're doing a proposal, is it will help group members, particularly those who might not be able to attend on the day. Having that clearly articulated impact gives us a really good understanding about where our money is going and what it's being used for. And related to that is that the beneficiaries are clear. So each of those projects had a kind of really clear group that it was going to benefit. All of the organizations that we funded, they're all small to medium. So I think, roughly speaking, probably around 5 million or less is probably the general size of organization that we fund. And the reason is because we want to make sure that our funding is going to have a really big impact. And so if we're funding, an organization that is a $200 million not-for-profit, our donation is just not really going to have the impact that we need. Now, that's not always the case. We did fund Asylum Seeker Centre one year, but that was because it was the year that COVID hit, and we knew that the Asylum Seeker Centre, they were already known to us because we had a previous proposal, and we knew that they were going to be able to distribute that funding to best effect to asylum seekers and migrant community members during the pandemic. But even Asylum Seeker Centre is not a massive charity. So generally, I think the small to medium is our sweet spot that we like to fund. We kind of look at local. Local, I think, as our group diversifies and as our group spreads, local becomes very subjective. So, we have funded projects in various places around Australia. We have members in New South Wales, ACT, Victoria, South Australia, and we even have some members who are overseas. Now, to date, we've only funded local, being Australian-based projects. There's nothing to say that we wouldn't fund something overseas. I would say that it would need to be an Australian charity or organisation who's doing the work overseas, or have some sort of arrangement. So there's nothing to say we wouldn't. I just think in general, this is what we have funded. We really, I can't stress this enough. Like we really like to fund things that otherwise struggle to get funding. I think we are giving a donation. We are a small group. We are a kind of a collective almost. So we have a really shared decision-making process. And all of that means that we're able to really target in to fund projects that would otherwise have a tough time getting funding. And, I think that has been something that has come up time and time again. The one that always comes to my mind is when we funded PartnerSpeak a few years ago. PartnerSpeak is an amazing organization that supports the non-offending partners and families of people who have, been found to be accessing child abuse material online. And, if you imagine the situation that the police come in, they seize the material, they charge the man generally, and he might even be arrested. And, left behind is a woman and her family who are dealing with the shame and taboo that they didn't know. They're discovering that the person that they loved was not who they thought. They might have just lost their main income winner or income earner of the household. Very traumatic situation. And what PartnerSpeak does is it comes in and it provides support to that woman and her family. Now, that should be funded by the government, really. But because of the nature, the taboo nature of the subject matter, I guess, and because of the size of the organization being very small, like they really struggle to find funding. So, we were able to come in and provide funding on a particular year to, again, that was a position to try and free up Natalie Walker, the CEO, to do a bit more focus on growth for the organization. So, that's the type of thing I think that we have the ability to do. But before you get started, I just want to kind of talk about some things that you might want to consider. So firstly, think about it in terms of we're giving a donation, not a grant. And what that means is we're not a grant maker. We don't need an acquittal. We don't need the organization to report back to us with any sort of interim report on how things are going. We are providing a donation. And in fact, what we're doing is we're providing around 45 individual $1,040 donations. We just pool it together and transfer it as one lump sum. And as a donation, I think, we would hope and expect that the organization who we fund will use the funding for the project that we have, given the money for. But we also understand that being a donation, if if something came up and the organization had to prioritize something else, that I guess is understandable, and we're trusting that organization will be using the money in good faith. We're also supporting organizations, but we focus our proposals around a project or a group. So leading on from the point I was just making, I think that when we look at the proposals, a part of it is trying to understand the project, but a part of it is also trying to understand the organization. So, in general, I think organization and members will do their own homework and due diligence on these things. And I think we want to kind of, I guess, see organizations that are probably established. They don't need to be big, but they have to be established. And so, we don't want to fund something that there's a high risk that it's actually not even going to be there in a year's time. So when you're doing your proposal, remember, one part of it is around helping us understand the organization, and then there's a part of it which is focusing on the project. We also require tax deductible receipts. So again, particularly if you're going to propose an overseas project, they do need to have the ability to provide a tax deductible receipt, which is why I was saying generally it would need to be an Australian organization, even if the work is taking place overseas. Sometimes the groups that we support are very small, and so they would need to find an auspicing partner, so someone who can take the funding and provide those tax receipts, but then that funding is going to go to that project. So as long as it can be structured in a way that we're able to get those tax deductible receipts, that's no problem. And things to remember when you're writing a proposal. So firstly, the form is simple, but it is important that all sections are complete. And that includes, all of the details around the contact person of the organization, as well as the details of the project. And it includes a website. So most of the time there will be a website. I understand that particularly if it's a really small project that there may not be, but where you can include a website or include a LinkedIn or a Facebook or an Instagram, some sort of social media, but something that the group members can go to when we receive the proposals to learn a bit more about who that organization is, what's their culture, what are their values, how do they operate, and so on and so forth. It's really important to talk about the why. It's just as important, if not more, than the what. We do want to know what we're funding, but we particularly want to know, why is this proposal being put on our table at on this any given year? So the why is just as important as the what. But also, it's important to keep it simple. So we don't want proposals that are pages and pages long. I think that you want to imagine that most of the group members in the Giving Circle are very busy people who care a lot about what we're doing, but may not have the time to read through huge, onerous, proposals. I think this is particularly important if the organization who you're proposing is going to help to do the proposal, because we don't want them spending 3 days preparing a proposal, because as I said, we're not grant makers. So I will put a suggested word count on each of the sections. Of course, it's just a suggestion. You can go over or under, it doesn't matter. But my advice is try and keep it concise, keep it clear. And we don't need to go overboard on the detail. Just keep it nice and simple. And make sure, again, this relates to the why, make sure you're explaining the impact. So what do we expect the outcomes to be from this donation? So we're giving a donation, it's funding a particular project. What do we expect the outcomes to be? And then related to keep it simple is that the details will come in the discussion. So it's really important, and I really want to emphasize that we will receive the proposals, group members will receive the proposals about a week before we have a discussion, and then everybody will be invited to participate in an online discussion where we will go through proposal by proposal, And we will talk about the strengths and the merits of each proposal. And we'll talk about where the group wants to focus on in this particular year and so on and so forth. So I recommend keeping the proposals nice and simple, and then we can get the color and the detail through the discussion when we have our discussion meeting. So here are some things that haven't been successful in the past. Supporting individuals. So when we think about impact, I guess there's always the question of breadth or depth. I think you could make an argument if you support an individual that would be supporting one person in a very deep way, which would then have lasting impacts on not only that individual, but their community. But so far, the group hasn't supported individuals. We haven't supported large organizations, as I said earlier. And I think, again, probably the sweet spot is 5 mil or under, give or take, a few mil. Like I wouldn't, if there's an organization you want to propose and it's 7 mil, I wouldn't shy away from it. I probably would think that an organization that's 50 mil in size is probably too big. And to that end, projects that might have other funding opportunities. So occasionally, something will come up that we think, that organization probably does have the capability to find other funding opportunities. And so in general, those types of things haven't been successful. Lack of clarity around the impact. So again, if a proposal comes forward and it's just not really clear what the money is going to be used for, I think that's probably a deterrent for some people. Even though I said it is a donation, and we are trusting organizations to use that money responsibly, there still does need to be a clear understanding for us on what that impact is. And similarly, uncertainty about the organization. As I said earlier, we have, I think over the years, maybe had 1 or 2 examples where there was just a few question marks around the sustainability of an organization or other factors that kind of maybe made people shy away from voting for them. But there's no hard and fast rules. So everything that I've said so far, is based on my experience from what I've seen over the years. But that's not to say that that's set in stone. So you may put a proposal for a large organization, but it's such a specific proposal for a specific project that the group says, no problem, let's go with it. Likewise with an individual, likewise with an overseas proposal, there's no hard and fast rule. It's a group decision. The way that we decide is that members will get the ability to have a conversation, read the proposals, have a conversation, and then vote. It's a completely transparent democratic process. I'll display what the votes were at the end of the process. And then whoever gets the most votes is who gets the money. So really, everything I've said is an indication of how we've done things previously, but it's not necessarily hard and fast rules. Okay, so you're thinking of doing a proposal. Thank you. That would be great. But how do you even get started? Well, the first thing is I really encourage people to think about things that you're interested in. If you're not interested in a particular project, or if you're not passionate about a particular area, it's going to be really difficult to get others to be passionate about it too. I mean, that sounds simple and it sounds like common sense, but it's a really important starting point. And it's also important that you do some background research. So it might not be the right year. You might have a great organization with a great project. It just might not be the right year. So do some background research on that organization, have a look at their annual report, where are they at, and do your homework before you reach out to the organization. You can also contact us. So contact Give Together, and we can help if you want to do a joint submission or even give advice on putting together a proposal. If you want to have more of a detailed chat, I'm also very happy to proof and give feedback on any proposal. you know, I think that support is always there if you need it. And you know, sometimes people will come across a project and they want to propose it, but they don't have the bandwidth to do it themselves. And you also might not know who else in the group could help you. So get in contact with us and we'll link you with someone. Alternatively, you might say, I have bandwidth, but I have no idea what project to do. So I'd be happy to do a joint submission with someone else. I just don't know what that would be. Let me know, and then we can put you in contact with someone if they need some help. You also really want to make sure that you talk to the organization before proposing to them. But not proposing to them, proposing their project. And this is for several reasons. I mean, it's basic etiquette, but also you might think of a priority area, but the organization might say, no, we've got a different strategy. Or you might find yourself in the case as it was with Rosemary, when we talked to her a few years back. She didn't want that amount of money. Sometimes, I mean, every organization, every charity, every not-for-profit would love to get more money, but it's not always the right time, or it's not always what they have capacity to do. So, you know, there might be an organization that doesn't have capacity to spend $45,000 in the next year. So always talk to them first. And then you can then talk to them about who our group is and what we do and what we're about. And finally, don't let the budget bog you down. So we have a section in the proposal which is for an indicative budget. I really don't want people to be laboring over this. It is just an indicative budget for us. So it's something that just helps us understand, again, nominally, where would the money go? Like what's our bang for buck? But it's not something to really get bogged down in. Okay, so now you've decided, oh, yep, I found this great organization. I've done my homework. I've thought about it, and now I want to approach them. So how do you do that? Well, firstly, give context about who we are, what we do. Some organizations are familiar with the concepts of giving circles, others aren't. So just give them a bit of a background on who we are, and you're more than welcome to share our brochure with them. Hopefully soon we'll have a website that we can share as well. Ask them if they can receive a donation of this size. Ask them if they have a specific project in mind. You know, we will fund startup projects, but we will also fund things that are pre-existing and, you know, they just need to get some more funding. That's what we did last year. We supported Women's Justice Network. Excuse me. We supported Women's Justice Network, and it was a pre-existing position. They just needed really another year's funding for that. So we can do that. Check if our donation will fully fund the project, but also check if they'll accept partial donations. So for example, the year that we split the donation, we fully funded the toilet. We partially funded the greenhouse project for Deadly Science. But, you know, I guess it's important to understand whether our funding is going to fully fund a project, or if it's only going to bring 5% of the full cost, or if it's going to bring 50% of the full cost. You know, neither is right or wrong. It just will help our group to kind of determine our own impact on that given year. And also, most of the time people will say, we'll definitely take partial donations, but I guess on occasion they might not. So just check that. And also check that they're able to do a tax deductible receipt, or if not, that they're able to auspice that with another organization who they might already have a partnership with, or who has, you know, joint objectives in their goals. And finally, again, I haven't had an issue with this, but just double check that they can issue individual receipts. And when you're explaining the context of the group, explain that it will be one lump sum payment, but it will be made up of individual donations of around $1,000. I will provide the successful organization with a full spreadsheet with members' names, addresses, the amount that they donated. And most of the time they'll just be able to do a quick mail merge to issue those receipts, but it's good to just check that. And finally, ask if they can help with the template. Now, this is a tricky one. We don't want to become too burdensome for the organization. So I don't want organizations to feel like they have to write a 3,000 word grant submission. But at the same time, they kind of most of the time want to be in control of their own story and what they want to apply for. So unless you have a pre-existing relationship with that organization and you have that established trust, most of the time the organizations will want to either develop the proposal or at least have close involvement with the development of the proposal. Where you can, by all means, write it for them. It's a huge help for organizations, and then they can proof it and make any changes if they want to. So finally, the last section, my final tips and suggestions on how to do this. Firstly, keep an open mind throughout the year. It's always really difficult when it's time to do submissions to think, oh, what do I want to fund? So you really have to just park a little space in your mind for the Giving Circle so that throughout your year, you will inevitably come across things. You might see things on TV, you might read an article, you might hear something on the newspaper, you might attend an event, and there'll be a person talking about some work that they're doing for this small organization. And it's at that time that it's best to go, oh, Giving Circle or Give Together, and just write it down or make a note. You can even email it to the Give Together email, and I'll put it on a list, so that if people are looking for proposals, I can say, oh, here's one that a member recommended. So yeah, keep an open mind throughout the year, I think, is the best ongoing practice. Also consider a joint proposal. I fully appreciate that not a lot of our members have never done this type of thing and might not be comfortable or confident doing it. And so, it helps to put in a joint proposal if you want to work on that with someone else. Like I said, if you don't have someone in mind, just contact Give Together and we can help link people up. We've done that over the years several times. And I think it's always a good process. Keeping it simple is really important. As I said, don't overcomplicate it. Just keep it very simple. And also don't worry about perfection. So if your proposal isn't perfect, that's no problem. The details will come in the discussion. And so you can always fill in any gaps when you have the discussion. And if you can't make the discussion, make sure that you have a nominated proxy who can speak on your behalf. And again, we can help facilitate that. But it's a really good way to make sure that if you're not there, someone can speak to the strengths of your proposal on your behalf. Reach out to me. I'm also happy to discuss, how to speak to your proposal in a good way. But we can definitely help with that. I think it's also, if you're quite close to your proposal, it's also good to have a proxy speak on your behalf because, having that kind of outsider perspective, I think also can really help make sure that the key points of that proposal are hit. And finally, play to your passions. So let enthusiasm be your guide. If you're not excited about it, it's really hard to get everyone else excited about it. So just think about what are the things that you're really passionate about. If you have any questions, please give us an email at givetogether.au@gmail.com. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. And look, I really encourage everyone to have a go. Or if you're curious and you want to find out more, just contact us. But thanks everyone for your time, and hopefully we'll get some good proposals.